Oh my goodness. Seriously, I have to just do it. It's like I can tell myself I don't have to think about things that don't matter.
I was designed to do those things. How the hell does this guy know this about me?
It's impossible to not see.
When Dan read for my sister, she was like, he's psychic. She's like, how does he know that?
Yes.
She's like, it's human design, guys. Like, it's just a testimony of how legit it is.
Seriously, Danny was like FBI or CIA. He's like, how the hell does this guy know this about me?
Having my chart read, there were just thing after thing after thing that I was just like, wow, that's me.
This man is reading me and I've never met him before.
I was in the midst of one of the biggest emotional waves I've ever been in my life, and he saved my life.
It seems like everybody has the same reaction. It's that aha moment, and they want to find out more. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Human Design Advantage podcast, Wednesday night show. My name is Jen, and Decoding the Matrix for us is Danny Guru.
Jennifer, it's good to see you. That was a nice opening. I enjoyed
Yes.
watching.
Could you hear it?
No, I couldn't hear it, but I'd watched it enough times. I knew exactly where they were at.
Okay. That's why I popped it off. That video I will make sure that we put up in the description, guys. I did have the sound on, but I checked our YouTube and it wouldn't play the sound. And I also had trouble embedding that video into our presentation. And I think that's because...
Yeah, they don't like that video, Jen.
Yes. So it was a bit restricted. But I'll make sure you guys can see it. I'll put it in the description so you know why we picked that video, because Dan's going to really pull some things out of what Joe was talking about.
That video exemplifies Joe Rogan's definition. It exemplifies it. I could hit almost every characteristic I care to go through tonight. Is shown in that clip that we played.
Yes. So sorry, guys, for the little bit of a discombobulation at the beginning of our show. But I will make sure that you see it. And when you see it, you'll understand why that video may have been restricted and why they would not let the sound play. But either way, before we dive into decoding Mr. Rogan's chart, please make sure you like, subscribe, and follow the show. And today is February 1st.
Oh my God. I already lost track of that. That's great.
Yes.
Time seems to be moving quickly, Jen. If time is relative, it is relative to what, apparently?
Yes. Well, I am still working with the concept of time, to be honest, because time at the end of the day is all illusion.
Apparently, by the way, apparently.
Yes, but I will say this. I came into this new year really making sure that I was going to stay focused and be present in the moment as much as possible. I am a mindfulness practitioner, and January was a very busy month. I was very productive, and a lot of stuff happened because I was paying attention in the moment.
Oh, and it was busy, all right. So the nice thing, so here's what I love about Joe. I'm going to start talking Joe. I always hope that the people we do these on watch them. The villains, I hope, watch them so they can grow a heart. And the people that I appreciate, watch them so that they can know that there's a lot more to them. So
I wonder if some of the villains even have hearts.
Yeah, no, there's a heart beating in there somewhere, but not likely to come out, of course. It's just that Joe really exemplifies what his definition in his chart and his incarnation cross say. So if this ever makes it, masks.
That was the new one when I saw it. I was like, oh.
It's a new one. It's a new one we get to go over a little bit of. And it's just, Joe, if you ever get a chance to hear this, you're going to hear me describe things about you. And it's not because I read it somewhere. It's not because I did anything other than I'm looking at your chart, which we're going to bring up now. Let's bring up his chart.
You know what? He should definitely be tagged into this, because this would be an excellent show for him to do.
And it's all true. Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't really listen to his podcast. So
I do. I freaking love this guy.
Has he ever talked about human design?
No. No.
No, well, he's had people on his show that
Undoubtedly
are
somebody
into
knows.
the pseudosciences
Yeah.
and quantum realm and
I
all.
contacted one of his guests once, and one of his liaisons did get back to me. Didn't really go anywhere, but it's just that. So people are they're approachable.
You got it. You got to send this next time, but that's what you should do.
Yeah. Nope. It's they're all approachable. Joe's an approachable man. He's just he grew up a regular dude. What we're looking at in his body graph. So this just stands out, man. When I look at, hang on, someone came up my way. Things that stand out right away. So he's a 6'2" profile. Joe Rogan, by the time he's approaching and gets to 50, which I think he's 50 something now because he was born in 67. As he was approaching 50, he started to truly become not objective, not subjective, not quite objective. He just started becoming himself. Now, he would like to think that he was becoming himself around age 45 or 40, and maybe he was. The thing is, a lot of wealth helps a person be themselves in today's not self world. It's just a thing because
he's got a wide open route, so he's not feeling the pressure as much. I'm pretty sure there is the pressure, but it's different from my pressure or your pressure.
Absolutely, because you and I have themes coming off of that root center, but he's got themes pointing at that root center. Mm-hmm. So those do end up counting in a different way. And no, he's not sure what pressure to accept. So I would imagine Joe guards his pressure like a good second line hermit would do, just by not engaging. Joe is good. So this profile first, the 6'2" profile. We've got the role model hermit, the person who in their 3-part lifespan is designed to be an anarchist in the beginning, in this particular profile, and then suddenly turn into the capable administrator that is able to allow people to speak and then speak back with them in a way that we would consider exemplary. It's in a way we would consider as a role model. And he does that. People love him for his down-to-earthness. That's a model. He's modeling what it is to be Joe Rogan in those moments. Mm-hmm. And it's wicked healthy for him. So the second line on the design side is where he's unconscious. Look, it's the 2343. It's a definition. It's between the throat and the ajna center, the channel of structuring, a design of waffling between the genius and not so genius, and then the genius and not so genius. And by the way, it's always the genius. The not so genius, or where other people might say you're weird, is when he can't explain himself. So Joe has managed to put himself in a hermit cave just right, dedicated. He dedicates himself to the ability to explain stuff. That's what he's doing. It's a dedication to explanation. That's what this channel brings out in him. Second lines in that. I'll read those off real quick because they stood out. So the 23, gate 23 in that channel is called assimilation, splitting apart. It's about splitting apart the noise in your head and reassembling it in a metamorphic capacity into language. Now, he's got right-facing arrows for his personality, his brain system. He's a generator. So in response to his guests, he's able to pull out of the vast ocean of that rightness, those variables, that which it can be explained efficiently because he's dedicated to a good explanation. The 23 splitting apart, it's this need when survival is threatened. So all the rest of the time, it's not this, but when survival is threatened, and it's the survival of his explanation, by the way, not his person. Right. When survival of his concept that came out of the Ajna Center is threatened, like on the video we just saw, he abandons civility. And it's not a full abandonment of civility. I'll read the line. The need to abandon tolerance when survival is threatened. So in that clip, if you saw it, you'll see that there were moments when he was not tolerant. He was not tolerant. He was not tolerant of Sanjay Gupta's desire to get off the subject. He was not tolerant to Sanjay Gupta's inability to say it straight. Yeah, CNN, lied. They said one thing and it was a lie. And he held him to task on that. I wish you could have heard it. You'd be laughing all the way through, Jen, all the way through. And he did.
Oh, I could hear it. I was kind of disappointed. Yeah, well, yeah, because it was playing out on my computer, and that's why I was disappointed that yes. That's why I popped it off, because I was like, oh, maybe I didn't hit the share audio, but there was share audio, and
yep. So this need for him to explain stuff makes him, again, go between genius and freak. As he gets older and older, it's less the freak and it's more the genius. He's learned to basically share his insights according to whatever timing is right. But sometimes Joe gets on this fixed trip. Look, it's individual after all. It's part of his incarnation cross. We know what individual definition does. It's unique. No one else has it. It's the one thing that brings mutation onto the planet. Joe's explanations and his ability to assimilate speech brings something unique and new to the planet. That's what this channel does. And if it's in the second line, it does so naturally. So that's a second line aspect. The natural. He just naturally can explain stuff. He can naturally be a comedian on stage. He's just natural at all of these things. This is what happens. And when you abandon tolerance for a moment because it threatens your breakthrough, when that happens, out gets called the person who says and stops them because he can't help it. So if you go onto Joe Rogan's show and try to BS him in some way, if he spots it, he can't help but to call it out because it's called out of him. Second lines hear the call. Every single interview he does, he hears the call. As long as he brings himself present. I bet you there's times when he goes in to do his interview where he just wasn't in the mood that day. Whatever. And so in his heart of hearts, he knows he wasn't necessarily called into that particular interview, but most of the time he is called into it. I'm bringing myself present. And that 43 that comes up with the concepts of what is it that's about to turn into an explanation of something. It's called breakthrough, the gate of insight. And second line is dedication. It's the maintenance of specialized attitudes which promote breakthrough. This is as relate to insights. It's unique mental habits, unique to him, and thought processes which promotes insight. So how exciting is that? He's got a chemical process genetically going on in his body that he's unaware of. By the way, he's aware of it by now, but he's unaware of that. It's truly a mechanic he can rely on going on inside of his body that allows him to be dedicated to the dedication to the maintenance of the attitudes which promote the breakthrough, this unique mental habit and thought process which promotes insight. So he's constantly got the next new insight being promoted. You and I have this gate 43, Jen. It never shuts off. It's noisy. It's got the next insight, the next insight. If someone were giving you and I nice new stimulating data every 10 seconds on something, on a screen, on something we were watching, whatever, you and I would be able to have the next new insight, rapid for hours, brand new insights over and over and over again until we got tired and then or fatigued or didn't care anymore.
But I still think that happens in dream state too.
It happens in what?
Dream state.
Oh, it probably does. Yeah. This over and over again-ness. But the freak and the genius is more now the genius. And there are times when he was young that people called him a freak for wanting to do the MMA, the mixed martial arts, for wanting to do comedy, for wanting to do all kinds of different things. But in his singular mind, he said, I'm going to break through at all costs. That's what this channel does. It wants to break through at all costs. It's itching to break through. And when you have just a gate 43 like you and I, it's still itching to break through. It just doesn't always have the explanation for it. It takes a little bit. Sometimes it can get discombobulated before it finally comes out. But what else is connected to this super powerful way that Joe has to explain stuff? Well, he's got this abstract process between the head and the ajna. You and I have that channel too, Jen.
Yep, I was just gonna say
Yeah.
the 6447.
Well, we've been seeing the people we care to have be our influential leaders seem to have head or ajna or both for definition, and for the most part. And only the superest of supervillains seem to have a defined ajna, and the rest of the minions are all open up there. They're open to the persuasion of the ideas. I don't have Sanjay Gupta's design, but I doubt he has a head and ajna defined. That means Joe Rogan can overpower almost all of his guests with his mental capacity. Not because his mental capacity is so amazing on the outside. It's because his mental capacity is so quick within the chemistry of his body on the inside. So if we ask Joe Rogan, Joe, are you always sure what you're going to say next? He'll say, hell no. Hey, and if we were on his shoulder and saying, Joe, you're in the middle of this conversation and it's 1 second before the person said something new for him to respond to, and we ask him the same question, he still wouldn't know what he's going to say next. He doesn't know until he's in response to the thing, and suddenly the confusion turns into an aha moment of realization. Joe is constantly doing what 64 and 47 do. They move from confusion as a pressure to a concept we know of as realization. And suddenly that turns into the insight that wants to break through and become dedicated in its assimilation and its ability to naturally deal with the other. Remember, so all that confusion process, moving to realization, moment by moment by moment, coming into this individual definition that goes straight to his throat, designed to speak with a voice. You know what this voice says? I say it all the time. This is the voice that says, I know, I know, I know, I know. So Joe, with an energy of I know.
Yeah, that was a big one for me. My mom would even say that she would tell me something and I know. And she'd get aggravated. She's like, you're not listening. No, you don't know. But it was just like something that automatically came out was I know.
Right. And if our parents had known, they would just not say anything. They would recognize we don't know and say something else that made sense to make sure you had some extra data. They can't stop us from saying, I know. We can't help it. It's baked into our particular program. Joe, it's a definition. It's not just baked into the program. It's working all the time, consistently. So confusion 47 is about realization. So there's times in Joe's life when that 47 has just been oppression. Don't know what to do next. This would have been in the third line phase of his life up through until he was about 30, 25, between 25 and 30. And don't know. It can't tell. Confusing, oppressive. Don't want to think about it. I can imagine Joe has had his moments of taking the TV and throwing it out the window. Probably not, but I wouldn't be surprised. Just withdrawing fully as the hermit, doesn't know, can't tell, is confused. And during those times, wanting to be strategic, but the arrows on the top right, the dependent variable, the top two arrows, the design top left and the personality top right arrows are the dependent variable. They depend on the variable below, and they're both facing right. So he's not able to be super strategic. He's able to be a super responder. And in that responsiveness, out comes the strategery that needs to be had. But there were times early in his life where he would have been terribly upset about not knowing what to do next, because strategically, he thought he had to strategically keep track of all the things that just became confusing. And that confusion process finally led him to the realization, gate 47 in that Ajna center, the realization that, oh my God, I've got the next new way. I've come to a new structure. I've put things in order. Ordering is a very important thing for Joe. He gets things ordered. It's important. It shows up in his life over and over again. And when things are out of order, it shows up that he has something to say about that. But anyways, all that ordering gets put into place in a flash, in a mutative moment. Like It wasn't there, and suddenly it's there. So when Sanjay Gupta said, well, I'd like to talk about the next 2 points, just no. Now, 2 seconds earlier, he didn't have that no necessarily energy like right there ready to go, but it was in perfect. Look at it like a ballet, the perfect ballet dancer that pulls everything off so flawlessly, right? They make it look so effortless. And that's what happens when Joe trusts his inner compass that has a response for each moment. He's not emotional. So
yeah, complete and no gate.
Completely open, right? Not only that, nothing's pointing at it.
Mm-hmm.
So in that openness, he doesn't know what to feel. Now, there are many times, like in his relationships, most likely he's married to an emotional woman with an emotional definition, shall I say. Not when people hear an emotional woman, they get it's right.
I'm pretty sure there's a lot of thoughts that come up when you say that.
Come up, and they're all homogenized thoughts. This is a clinical term. We're talking about a defined solar plex. So a defined solar plex woman that I imagine Joe is married to, or it's in the family anyways. And so sometimes Joe feels bad because he doesn't know how to feel, doesn't know what to feel. And he's a hermit, so he'll keep that to himself mostly. And sometimes he'll express it. I don't know what the combination of that is, but Joe does. He knows what that combination looks like. Again, the older he gets, the more he is his role model self, the easier he will speak to those little things that, the stuff everyone holds back on, Jen. Everyone's got stuff that they just don't volunteer, and they're always tiny little things. It's easy to volunteer. I had a drug problem. Whatever. It's easy to volunteer that when you finally come to it, but it's the little things that you never come to because they're easy to not come to because they're little. It's just, and when you're totally open that way, they're not only are they little, but they're also big in the moment. And then they get sort of squished into littleness and they go and fade into the background and not knowing what to feel. How I experienced not knowing what to feel as an open emotional person was all as it related to my intimacy because I have a gate 6, so I have a theme. But still, it was the same result. It was always the woman on the other side, my mate, my partner on the other side, complaining and or being mad at me for appearing to not know how to feel about their emotional wave in that moment, about their clarity process that was coming through. And I would get fingers pointed at me. So there have been times in Joe's life when it shows up most profoundly in a relationship. That's why I always say when the other woman, but it could be anywhere, a friend, a parent, himself. He's got a busy head. He talks to himself all the time. Joe's always right. Look at right arrows, a right personality, all that definition, ajna head to throat. He talks to himself. Joe he's always got a story playing in his head. It never shuts off.
His errors are the same as mine.
Same as yours. When does it shut off, Jen?
It never does. And I am constantly talking to myself.
Right.
Now that I have the cats, I can at least have a conversation with them. But
and he's under pressure to know what conversations to have with himself because he's always working out the past to bring it into the future.
Yes, I was just going to say that.
It never turns off. So there have been times when people have said, you're thinking too much. There's too much going on. There's been times when Joe is mumbling to himself, which is perfectly, if you've got I mumble to myself. I've got the same definition. And it's wicked good. It's how we meditate. When I say how, it is one of the ways in which this definition will meditate correctly for them. Let the images go through. Keep it busy up there. You're working out things. You're coming to realizations. You're about to have aha moments with incredible breakthroughs that you can explain. All of this stuff is pouring out of him.
One thing that I have noticed with all the Defined Head Center and these gates is that I really wish that I could screenshot some of the stuff that comes through.
Oh God, yes.
I have learned that journaling is a huge lifesaver for me, writing those things down, because it also helps me retain what's going on there. But sometimes the clarity comes in and it's so much that I wish that I could just screenshot it.
It's just, I wish I would always say I remember my second wife, Elaine, I just would always say to her, Elaine, I wish we could find me, 4 or 5 Robert Palmer girls that would follow me around with notepads so that every time I said something, the next greatest idea would not get lost.
Yes.
Because out of you and I come amazing ideas. Out of Joe comes these amazing ideas.
Yeah.
That just new breakthroughs, new concepts. They're rolling at a mile a minute. And again, back to the talking to oneself inside your own head, there's times when talking to yourself out of your own head makes it to the outside world. It's embarrassing if someone catches that. So, right? So,
full-fledged conversation.
we've all been there.
To myself.
Yes. And this is a powerful, powerful, abstract process. It wants to feel the feeling ultimately. It wants to be in the process. It's abstract. It just wants to be in the moment with that process to try and see it through. So here comes the argument he's having in his head. And plenty of the things are arguments in his head because he's got this defined ego going directly to the throat. And so plenty of them are arguments. So, yeah, well, that guy says this, I said that. And so out it plays vividly. And it's so exciting in a moment. And then he starts to lose it. We're not meant to be able to hang on to it. It's moving into the ocean of rightness. What we are meant to do is in response, suddenly all that comes back out. It all comes back out. Joe surprises himself with the magnitude of things that just pour out of him. Not always, but often. And it must be just an exciting place to be until he starts talking to himself and he doesn't know how to feel because he just doesn't know how to feel. Did I look weird? Did I look strange? Whatever. And suddenly that abstract process kicks up with more confusion. Every time the abstract process in the mental definition up top, that channel of abstraction, 6447, every time that process picks up the next new bit of information that the body delivers it, which is all day long, it starts up a new confusion process. You can look at gate 64 in his body graph like a catalog. Well, Joe, if it were able to report in with a voice, it would report in with, well, Joe, we've got about 13,000 things to be confused about currently running. And sometimes we get that down to 1,000. I'm making jokes. It might be hundreds. It might be one. I don't know. But it's many. It's almost always many things with worth being confused about. And this busy mental process of his is always getting unconfused, turning into realization. And it's just amazing how that keeps showing up in his. It's what makes him such an intelligent interviewer. It's not because of his maximized intelligence. He has learned to trust the fact that he is intelligent in the moment. He does a share of reading. I'm not saying that the guy does, but with his station in life and that mental abstract process and that ego definition that is able to go ahead and just fire up the next process, he's always able to do the next thing and start it. So I'm not even saying he feels bad about that, but it's what makes you an amazing processor to process the interviews with other people. And look what happens. He shows up as the 6-line role model. He administers the capable administrator. That's what 7-6 is in his personality. It's the ability to basically administer things capably. And that means because it's in a collective channel, it's about his role in interaction with the other. So his role in interaction with the other is capably able to administer how that interaction goes. It doesn't get too hot. It doesn't get too cool. It stays just right. And he's made a whole career on that process. And the people have come to appreciate him because where the 5th line personality brings the heresy, hey, we need the heresy. We need the general. Bring it in. The 6th line sits above it and ordains that heresy, ordains that next new thing that comes in, that next explanation, that next correctness of a human in interaction with the other. So basically he's ordaining and validating his own role modelness every time he talks. People see that. They see it. They feel it. It comes through. We've already discussed the aura. They're not in Joe's aura, so they don't get that powerful ego put into them. They're not in his aura, so they don't get the benefit fully of that confusion process. But we already know that part of the aura transfers through the vocal quality and the visual appearance put together. You know, if you just saw the visual without the vocal, no could do. But if you just had the vocal without the visual, that aura, part of that aura will transfer. It is through the auditory. What we hear in that vocal, I'm saying it all the time, the vocal quality of the being has told me what I needed to know. You know, when I'm watching politicians and you can see their tics and their delays, but the vocal quality of Sanjay Gupta let me know that he's probably a generator. And
I pulled his chart according to what I found online.
Oh.
And he is a generator.
Okay.
And he has a defined head center and a defined ajna.
Oh, so Joe put, so that when those two things duel, when they are at odds dueling with each other, one succumbs to the confusion because one dominates. And then they'll trade back and forth if it's a reasonable conversation. Jen, you and I could have a reasonable conversation, and suddenly you'll say something, and my confusion has to surrender to the dominance of your now working mental realization. And then I'll have a realization, and you'll surrender to the dominance of, it's about timing. That's all. It's not one's dominating the other. It's just about the timing, because while my realization process is working, suddenly you're taking it in. It's new to you. So you go through a confusion process into your realization. The closer we get together as we talk, the more we're on the same wavelength, you know, and it's just a process. So,
yes, and that has happened to us in a lot of conversations.
Absolutely. And we've seen when we were quite a distance apart. I don't know about some of these things, Jen.
Yeah, I know.
and
well, it's interesting stuff I've told you like a year ago. Now you're sending me.
Right. Now I'm sending it. Right. Well, I had my confusion process. Thank you for waiting for me, Jen. Thank you.
I'm, you know, I like how you're explaining it now. And in my world, I would have, you know, I was saying in divine timing, it would either come around, you would make the clarity, connect the dots.
Right. Well, that divine timing, Jen, think about it. Our chemistry is dialing in that divine timing.
Mm-hmm.
I always have this beautiful thing. Is the divine timing out there? And I would have it black and white. Is it in here? It's a mixture, I would imagine. But really, it's still in here. Our chemistry. Yes. So even if there is something coming in from the outside as it relates to the divinity of timing, it's still at the translation inside of our chemistry that divine times it.
Yes, because it's all coming from within, going out.
Right. And so with this powerful mental definition, we are all, I would love to see the four of us in a room. Poor Sanjay would be on a
yes, because Sanjay, well,
he's in a weaker position. He took a weak position.
I couldn't get a time, but he has the 6124. He also has gate 47.
6124? Okay.
Yes. He has the channel right next, and he has gate 47, but that's it.
Right. So then that's the knower that's above the gate for the 2343. Look, it's in that same stream. So uniquely, when Sanjay was getting his job, they found Sanjay to be brilliant because he had unique knowing in the moment that he could express. Because as a generator, he would have been in response to all of that. I remember when Sanjay joined CNN, he was just a doctor. He showed up and he seemed so flashy and he was so handsome as it relates to the kind of look they want to have. And he seemed so confident. I was watching his knower know. And it was medical information that seemed reasonable. And this was years and years ago about something having nothing to do with any of the stuff for today. And it seemed so credible. I was like, wow, that guy's good. He took off. I was right. He was good as it relates to being able to take off in fake news media. I didn't know about fake news media back then. But I did know.
I don't even know who he is. I never really watched CNN. But I didn't really watch
I was stuck
that much.
During the Gulf War, we had it on almost all the time. Just like good little minions were programmed to do, Jen. I was in the Matrix. What did I know? So all this stuff's going on in Joe, and as it relates to when that confusion comes, the only advice I can give him is understand you have a generative capacity that's always able to deliver a response. It's what made you a good MMA wrestler, by the way. Immediately responding to the moments at hand. So so we take all of that and we see that confusion pour through, and we see how it goes through this beautiful process to be able to communicate, and we see how the older he gets, he becomes the role model of what that is. We see that his incarnation cross is the incarnation cross of masks. Masks says, if I'm going to be the role model, I'm here to be influential. I'm best influential from behind a mask. That's all. Not a fake mask, like someone truly wants to hide their identity. The mask very often in our day and age is a title. 1,000 years ago, it was a mask.
A persona.
A persona, a title, a persona, a way, a thing. What is his persona? The Joe Rogan podcast. What is his persona? In fact, his persona precedes him, that little circle with the monkey in the middle.
That makes complete sense.
Yeah. Sometimes his persona is the cigar. If you watch him enough, that he passes out cigars, something to do to put as a part of his cloak, part of his costume.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's the costume that he puts on every day, because now everybody knows who Joe Rogan is because of the Joe Rogan podcast.
Right. And other part of his persona is part of his mask are all his tattoos. He's tattooed everywhere. Right? You see it's on his arms. That's sort of part of it. The title, it's not just Joe Rogan, it's Joe Rogan MMA. He was a big deal, apparently. That's something I don't really key into very much, but he made a mark.
I used to watch MMA, and I guess I stopped watching when he started doing it, to be honest.
Yeah. So apparently he made enough of a mark, but then he went in and started doing coaching stuff. And if not coaching stuff, he was hanging out with the guys, and he started doing ref stuff. I saw him get in the middle at one point and sort of referee a few things. I want a role model being a referee. I want this man being a referee in an MMA match, because the natural will get called to deliver the explanation that needs to be barked out in the moment according to what his role and interaction needs to administer according to what he heard, the listener. So his gate 13.6 is the listener. And that gate that's on the top right, personality, again, part of his incarnation cross of masks. What happens is he needs to be the capable administrator that is also the listener. And that listener, people are always telling Joe stuff. It is a superpower he has. The gate 13 coming off the top of his G center. It's in the collective abstract circuitry, just like that channel of abstraction. It's the last step before the story gets told. He is constantly collecting the information that is designed to get out into the world and finally tell the story. Tell what happened. Tell the thing. So what has he got? He's got a whole life built on 2 and 3 hour long podcasts whereby he's listening so that he can reconvert and tell the story. And he's doing so as an administrator. I mean, take this word administrator and make it sexy, guys. It's wicked cool. Look what he does. He administers those 3 hours or those 2 hours. He becomes the administrator of those hours, the person capably able to, in interaction with the other, give and take, and he's constantly doing it. And he's doing it according to what he was just listening to, because gate 13, the listener, is part of the channel of the prodigal. All it wants to do is basically give its remembrance and tell the story and bring back the past in a way that's becomes something of value. The storyteller in our whole life's history as humans has been one of the most important aspects, because they have told the stories generation after generation that kept the continuity. This is here to keep continuity with the past. And Joe is perfect at it. He's perfect at keeping continuity with the past. He's always everything he says is, hey, I remember when, dude, one time I was he is constantly telling a stimulating story.
Yeah, I was just looking. I know there are certain keywords that are, each gate on the throat has.
Oh, yeah.
Is normal.
Yep.
That you would say. And I have gate 45, and that is I have.
Or I don't have.
And 33 is from what I wrote down is the I remember.
I remember. And now he doesn't have a gate 33. However, he's got a crew there. And his whole life he's wanted a gate 33, because we always want the gates we don't have. And so he spends so much of his time musing into his past about what he remembers.
Mm.
And it makes him a great interviewer, because out of the ocean of his rightness and the variable, the dependent variable on top, the arrow pointing to the right, out of that ocean comes everything he needs. And the older he is, the more has gone in to fill up that ocean of data and material and experiences and wisdom and the things that get pulled out of him. So through that gate 13, it attracts the other to tell their story, to tell him the things. And suddenly out of him gets pulled all the things he remembers. And together they're able to have an amazing conversation day in and day out. The cat he can't go wrong. Here's how he could go wrong. He could go wrong if he starts trying. As soon as he starts to try, he's being strategic, and then he goes wrong. As soon as he's not trying, he can't help but to get it right. Every time, except once in a while, he won't get it right, because don't forget, there is part of him that is a freak. And with that, he'll go off on a tangent or do a thing that maybe went off bounds. But you could probably count it on one hand the number of times that really happens, because he has grown into his role model self. Gate 13, line 6, is the optimist. The ability to accept limited interactions, which is what this is. It's a limited interaction, as necessary steps towards greater understanding, greater union. The ability to accept limited 3-hour chunks of time with people in order to get a greater story to tell and bring greater cohesion and what ends up being understanding, but it's really the conceptualizing logical process of realizing what was the scoop with all of that. He's designed to do that. So this man is basically living out his nature, and the things that pull him away from his nature are these open centers, not knowing what to feel. There are times when Joe just feels guilty. If he's got an totally open solar plex, he is susceptible to guilt, shame, and blame. Plenty of it. We're all susceptible to it. But if you're open, you're susceptible to it. And he's open in that solar plex center. So the second he wasn't feeling correct the way someone else wanted him to feel, suddenly there is a conflict. Sometimes he deals with that conflict just fine. Hey, that's not my responsibility to feel that way. Sometimes it gets caught off guard. The confusion turns on. The words aren't quite right. The timing of his explanation isn't perfect in that moment. He left responding and started thinking and trying to say the right thing rather than just responding with what was true. And that's, again, I keep going back to this right arrow on his body graph because it's so important. If you have a right arrow in your personality, top right arrow, trying is your worst enemy almost all the time. Trying to think of what to do is a strategic process. Being,
I can testify to that.
Yes, being is your best friend. Trying is your enemy. And it's about explaining, trying to explain rather than being the explanation. When he's being his generative self, he's a responder, and he's responding with the explanation. When he's trying because someone made him feel bad because he didn't feel right, he didn't hold the right space. The woman he was with didn't, needed him to feel a certain way. He wasn't in the mood, wasn't there. It wasn't his place to be that for her, but she wanted it anyways and made him feel guilty because he wasn't close enough. He wasn't open enough. What are all the things one partner can say to the other about how they don't feel deeply enough with them? They can't, there's no empathy there. Bullshit. He's got the gate of empathy, gate 13. Its foundation is about empathy. It's one of the role gates. It's the role in openness and empathy to the other. That's what gate 13 is. And we have a genetic proclivity and a need to be open to the other in a limited format. So he's always finding the right limited format. What did he do? He carved himself out 2 and 3 hour segments to limit the format. And so it's perfect for him. And he always keeps himself stimulating. So what does gate 56 say in the throat? In the throat center. Look at your chart. Gate 56. He's got gate 56.
Believe.
I believe. So This is about being stimulating and coming up with something stimulating to say next so that the stimulatingness can keep the story going. It's about stimulating an abstract process and speaking in a stimulating way that strings together various things that make it stimulating. Joe is constantly making it stimulating. Gate 31 in his throat center. What does that say to be? I
don't have that one written down. I only have mine written down.
I am influential or not. I lead or not. Joe is the role model of what it is to be a leader. He leads. Now he's a hermit, so he doesn't ask for that leadership. This is in a collective channel. Remember, so it shares. Joe shares the influentialness. It's the gate of influence, 31. The design to influentially lead as someone who can administer each situation logically. So he's got a lot of logic, a lot of abstract going on. He's got individual definition, and then he's got this tribal definition, which I'll get to in a moment. So open solar plex, not always knowing what to feel, being made to feel guilty because he didn't feel what the other thought they wanted him to feel. And when those moments happen, the confusion will set on and he'll be constantly working through explanations. And if it turns into a fight, it's because the timing of those explanations weren't right. What else takes him away from his nature? Open root center. Again, completely open. Not even knowing what pressure field to be in. He can't even tell if he's in a pressure field sometimes until suddenly the pressure is so much that's like, oh my God. But that open root is still doing what it does. It's in a hurry to be free of pressure. So I've heard him describe to me times when he is just relentlessly working out. What does he do to get rid of stress? He relentlessly works out. If you have a completely open root center, you've taken in all the pressures of everyone around you in every way. So he's wound up by the time his day is, unless he's worked it all out, he is wound up by the time his day is a few hours in, if he's with his crew. And
that's why he works out the way that he does, because it's a way to help relieve some of that pressure.
And he's a generator, so that energy is sustaining. And he's got a gate off that generative box, gate 3, which just wants to put things in order. I'm under pressure to get things in order. The order's not there. Let me go work out at the gym. I'm in the pressure to have my unique insight suddenly break through and have it transcendently turn into something that has a shape to it. I don't have it yet. Let me go work it out. And so he gets into that gym, and he's described it more than once. He does it like an animal. And so what is he really doing? He's just naturally doing what a good dog would do. Run, until they're tired. Just let that sacral, again, it's like the tennis player. Hit the ball, hit the ball, hit the ball. You take all the tennis players, you're going to find the vast majority of them, far more than is proportionally represented in the population, will be generators. Because that's that's the definition of a generator. Repeat, hit the ball, hit, just hit it, and put your power behind each hit. Gain mastery level by level.
That's interesting you say that, because the country club I worked for was a tennis club, and I can actually see that with some of the members that I knew close.
Day and night. Sometimes they would,
and I would sit there, and they would come and play early in the morning, and then they'd get together in the afternoon for a tournament, and then they'd do something in the evening. And
did you ever notice some of them, they would be at it, and you would go back a while later and they're still doing it, and you had this concept go through that was like, how do they?
Yes, that's what I was just about to say. Like
So people look at Joe and be like, how does he work out so hard? How does he? Well, he's getting rid of that pressure. And if I could speak to him, I would label that pressure for him. It's the pressure to want to break through. It's the pressure to want to basically relieve the wound upness that has confusion pouring through it. Because sometimes he doesn't like his confusion, and he's aware of it. It's black in his body graph. It's in his conscious personality, but he still doesn't like it necessarily. I don't want to put words in Joe's mouth, but I'm guessing if I asked him, is that true? He'd point out, yeah. Oftentimes it's true. And so struggling for purpose, wanting to be, have what he cares about show up, wanting to know he has or not. Gate 45. Hey, I don't have this. Hey, I have that. Hey, I don't have this. Hey, I have that. It's the gate of the king and the queen. So the spleen of his, other things that pull him away from his nature, other than feeling like he's under pressure to get rid of the pressure, wanting to be in a hurry. Hey, stop talking so much. Hey, do I need to listen to this anymore? Hey, I don't want to listen anymore. That's Joe. Not all the time, but that's often Joe. I don't want to listen anymore. I don't want to hear it anymore. I'm under pressure to not have to be under pressure to do what you just told me you think needs to be done. Boom, not what I had in mind. Pressure, pressure, pressure. So getting off of that, what happens next? We go to the gates that bridge him. So gate 57, and they're all off the spleen, and one is off the sacral. So gate 57 goes straight up to gate 20. So where's Joe's missing gate? Gate 20. So what puts Joe under pressure? Wanting to be in the now and hurry up. Wanting now. Why can't I have this now? I just want this now. He sets up his whole life so that all the things he can have in the now, he has in the now to make up for this missing gate. That's who he's not. I can envision that he's got a structured way he walks into the house and out of the house. I don't know if that's actually true, but so that the now can happen quickly for him because he feels like he's not always in the now enough. So he goes and works out like an animal to bring himself present into the now. And if I were speaking to him, I'd just be like, Joe, that's who you're not. You're perfectly in the now as you reorient yourself as a responder to just respond. Every responsive moment brings you
in the now.
Yeah. He's also, look at his sacral. He's got a gate 15 off of the G center pointing at gate 5 in the sacral. This is another thing that has him working out like an animal, and several other things. So he's missing gate 5. That would bridge the split between these two sections of his body graph. Gate 5 is fixed patterns. It's part of what cellular existence requires. Every cell in our body has a 15-5 in it as a design. And 15 says, nope, fixed patterns. We need to fix this thing a certain way, get it to be just so, and work with these patterns and only adapt to new patterns as needed, but establish a new set of patterns that makes logical sense about surviving into the future. And I want fixed patterns. So if you're missing this gate and you've got the gate of extremes above it, so here's Joe. He shows up with one of the vessel of love gates, the gate of extremes, the love of humanity. By the way, this is unconscious in Joe, this love of humanity, and it sets the morals for his humanity, and it's in direct harmony to his profile because it's in his Venus, 15-5. So the mores and the morality and the things Joe is going to come up with unconsciously are going to get spit out in the form of allowing the extreme nature of things. Hey, what you busting that guy for? It's always that way, let it be. Joe is Mr. Allows extreme nature. So he works out in an extreme nature, but he's never fully satisfied that the pattern of it was just right. He's always trying to perfect the pattern of everything. Joe, it's not your responsibility. The pattern works out when you're a responder and you allow your confusion factory to talk to itself, not care who's listening, not care about that you don't always know what to feel, not care that you're under pressure and just let the pressure flow through. That's when the pattern will set itself up straight. The pattern is already inherent. You're a sacral being. The pattern will show up. It'll show up in the transits. It'll show up in you, and it'll show up as you don't need to. Your responder will immediately give you what the pattern is. Just be the extreme nature that you are. It's perfect. By the way, he mostly does that. But it gets confusing when somebody comes up and tries to stick a new pattern into the life of Joe Rogan in certain ways, and suddenly that gets off-putting. Hey, I don't know about this whole pattern thing. I think I want this pattern. You don't have gate 5, the gate of fixed patterns, the gate of the channel of rhythm that takes all things extremes and puts them into a steady rhythm. You don't have gate 5. That's okay. A ton of other people don't have gate 5. Everyone has gates they're missing. So it's perfect. We just had a line change, 15-6. That's funny. We're talking about that. So anyways, we're moving into an extreme nature for the next 10 hours. so that's what's up. These things would bridge him. There's others that would bridge his split, but I want to move on to these two tribal channels he has. So he was a Sphinx as his incarnation cross, but because it moved along and he was born later in that hexagram's couple of days, he became a left angle cross, no longer a Sphinx. Joe was always meant to drive a direction. It's just he's moved into the transpersonal version of that, where he's meant to share the drive of that direction. So he's living out his incarnation cross.
Yeah, I would say he is.
What's empowering it? So there's two motors in his body graph, a sacral and an ego. These powerful motors, all the motors are powerful. They motorize the existence.
What are the motors again? The sacral, the ego,
the root
solar
and
plex?
solar plex and the root.
Okay.
These move us. These are the motors that move us. And so I saved these two definitions for last because they're the motors that move him. Part of Joe Rogan is simply a manifester. He fancies himself a manifester. I go out and do. I just do. Because 21 to 45 is a manifesting channel. It's an archetype. In fact, if you have a body graph with only 2145, you are the archetype of a manifester. A direct connection directly to the throat from the ego. It's not emotional meaning. It's not emotional. It's just ego driven. And so gate 21 is there to control the environment. So what did he do with Sanjay Gupta in that hunk of video in the beginning? He controlled that environment. He was in charge of that environment. There was no getting out of that environment. And once the controlling nature of Joe Rogan showed up to get into that environment, he was an anarchist about it. He just held that person in place. No. I'm controlling the words that are speaking in this environment. And the graciousness of the king and the queen and the ruler that sits above in gate 45, the grace of that ruler is to give a little. I'm already the king. The king can have a laugh while I'm grilling you. So a couple times he would pull back. No, don't worry about it. He'd smile, and then I'm right back in to controlling. And then he'd pull back and he'd smile. The king smiles so that he can gain the attention of the people. No one wants a frowning king. No one wants a king that doesn't look out for the best interest of the people. They will revolt. The kings know they serve at the pleasure of the people. Ultimately, in our nine-centered existence, this must be a communing process, not simply an authoritarian process. Sometimes Joe Rogan, if this time was right, earlier in the day, he didn't have all of this definition, but some certain things just didn't make sense, so I picked this time. So if he has this definition, then that gate 45, when that shows up, that gate 45 shows up as 45-2. He's driven to do what 45 demands. 45 demands that we coming to meet, gathering together is what it is. The gatherer. It's this natural awareness, and it's not really an awareness, but it's this natural, generally beneficial attraction of like forces. The king is supposed to bring in the like forces so that it can do what gate 45's most responsible thing it can do, educate people as to what's true. And he is, and I keep going back to this American tribe. I'm pretty convinced that America, the United States, is its own tribe with many subsets.
Yes.
But the American tribe is not so loosely held together by the very values Joe Rogan tends to portray in his interviewing style. So what has he become? He's become the tribal voice of America. I mean, you couldn't have called that one out any better. And it's manifested. He manifested that. But
I have 45, and that's part of my incarnation cross.
Yes, it is. It is part of your incarnation cross. Well, it's part of his drive.
Yeah.
And in the second line, it harmonizes with his need to explain stuff. It resonates. So if he's got a second line profile in his unconscious and he's driven by that second line moon to do stuff, it's in direct resonance to what he's going to explain. So Joe Rogan is always explaining not only the stuff that I explained before, but he's always explaining what is it to get to a consensus. He's driven to be amplify what is a consensus. to become the role model of what becomes bringing people together as a consensus. And it's the gathering together, the strengthened by the acknowledgement of a common interest. So he brings Sanjay Gupta on to get to a common interest. His whole show is about bringing us naturally to a common interest in a way he can explain it and put forth that ego willpower that explains it with the force of what this channel of material and money and rulership does. Again, in the old seven-centered way, this rulership was barbaric. It was there authoritarian only. It was there to control and beat people down and murder. In our nine-centered existence, it's there to commune. So what's the beneficial interest that he's there bringing like forces there to do? To educate and to bring the rest of the American tribe into a way that Joe was designed to bring forward. And he does so with great ego willpower. Does Sanjay Gupta's chart show he had an ego?
No, he has a completely open ego, but he has gate 45 and 25.
Okay, so lots of stuff pointing at it.
Mhm.
So the gate of innocence, 25. So how about his solar plex? Was that open too?
Yeah, he has an open solar plex.
So he did not stand a chance, and most people don't. When Joe Rogan's ego starts to speak, which it can't help but to speak, it's connected directly to the throat. That ego is powerful. It's powerful, and someone in being confronted with that feels that manifesting force of that ego, that repelling, resisting, manifesting, controlling force of this ego, able to control its surroundings for good reason, by the way. Had he not controlled his surroundings, Sanjay Gupta, with a lesser interviewer, might have gotten away with trying to skirt off the topic of CNN having lied, not with the controller around. I am Joe Rogan. I will control you. You know, he's the freaking Terminator, you know, when it comes to that stuff. I don't know why adversarial people would ever go on to Joe Rogan's podcast. He's the freaking Terminator when it comes to that, if he feels like it. Again, he has to feel called. He's a second line in his profile. If he doesn't feel called into it, maybe he'll go a little easier, but generally he can't help it. So there's one of his motors. So when Joe thinks he's the manifester, he's still so far off track. Now he's trying again.
Yeah.
And the rightness in his body graph says, you're not trying. You must simply be, my son. You do not try. You be. And I bet you he has given that exact advice to his MMA wrestling buddies and the younger MMA wrestler guys. I bet you this channel of the king and the queen is the perfect mentor. 45 is one of the teaching gates. I know it's not normally listed that way, but because it's there to educate, it's there to be a role model, an example of what to teach. Don't think, be. And I promise you, he has said these words to other younger wrestlers who have come to him and said, Joe, put your wisdom onto me. First of all, why do other wrestlers want Joe's wisdom onto them? Because he's a freaking role model.
Yeah, I was just going to say, because of his profile type.
Yes. And then that second line, people are always projecting on him. They're always expecting him to, just because he's a natural. They project upon him that he's a natural to give advice in a role model capacity to this person. Lori Bell is a 6'2". Tress is a 6'2". 6'2s are everywhere. What we see is Joe could have been totally struck in place had he not tried to educate and feel called into educating with that extreme ego willpower of his that is there for the common good. Again, the attraction of beneficial like forces. So it was beneficial to bring Sanjay Gupta on when he became not a, quote, like force because he tried to squirm out of the lying nature of CNN. He held him to task and brought him back in line. Sanjay Gupta walked out of there with his tail between his legs mostly, but Joe, in his, the good king and queen, still doesn't let the guest in the house feel like an absolute douchebag. It's just
Right.
it's not regal. It's not what royalty should do. It's not in our nine-centered version of that, which has nothing to do with titles, royalty, entitlement, none of it. But I'm just using terms we sort of understand. In our nine-centered way, royalty is there to be gracious about all of that and bring it into line and help sew it up at the end. I saw that whole interview. At the end, he still rattled off, the controller still rattled off the moral of some of the story he was telling, but he still let both forces leave as not both broken down. He didn't let Sanjay leave as simply a broken down dude. Have you ever seen Stu Peters or some of these other peoples that interview people? If they come across the wrong person that's totally against them, they will tear them down and leave
Yeah.
them and send them away crying if they can. Not Joe. Joe's not that dude. I mean, not generally. There are times when someone deserves a pile of whoop ass. Well, guess what? That's when the ego comes out and opens up a can of whoop ass. You know, I imagine he was a good wrestler because that ego wants to win. It wants to be first. It wants to do the thing. And the ego puts its shoulder to the wheel and it says, I will do the thing. And when it says, I will, that's the willpower of the ego. It's true. He will do the thing. And so he did. So what's the thing he's doing? And why does that still bring him away from his nature sometimes? When that ego pours out of him too much, he starts thinking rather than being. Back to that. It's a moral of the story for Joe. What is it that he needs to be? He needs to be what the sacral, dude, his authority is his sacral. His strategy is sacral to respond. His authority is the sacral center because he doesn't have a defined solar plex that immediately defaults to the sacral as the next authority. Right. So he's a sacral being. If you're a sacral being, you must get out of the I will, I am doing, I will manifest business and reorient yourself into the responsive business that says, I don't fucking know. Plus he's got right-facing arrows. I don't know. Oh, I'm responding. I'm going to punch in the face. Oh, I'm MMA match. I know what I'm doing now. I'm going to win or lose. By the way, the good king and queen takes a loss like a good sport. A role model takes a loss like a good sport. If the other guy fought dirty, he'll have something to say about that. But if it's fair and square and the other guy, beat him down and they won that match, I don't assume Joe Rogan won every match, right? So whichever ones he lost, I don't know, by the way. Maybe he won every match. I don't think he did. But who does? Who wins all? Nobody. Even Mike Tyson got knocked down. I forgot who knocked him down, but someone did. Anyways, so all of that's there as a generator, reorienting yourself into a responsive state where you just surrender to not knowing. You don't need gate 20 to bring you into the now. You don't need fixed patterns to always be a certain way. You can allow things to be streamed. You don't need gate 10 would have bridged them. You don't need gate 10s. Joe Rogan looks in on his own behavior sometimes, wondering if it's the right behavior and concerning himself with that behavior. It puts him under pressure. And sometimes he probably even censors himself in conversation in those interviews now and again, because his not self is looking at the behavior. He can't tell. No gate 10. He can't tell if his behavior is the right behavior necessarily. And it's one of his bridging gates. So he's always looking at it. None of that comes into any play when you look at what his actual definition is, the channel of nurturing, the channel of preservation. Joe is designed to preserve a family, period. He's designed to preserve the values that make up the tribe, the deep cauldron of values that make up the tribe. And because he's so tribally driven, gate 44 in that moon of his drives him to be alert. He's alert to that. Gate 44 of splenic alertness in a defined spleen. Its fear is of the past. Its fear is of extinction. So, hey, my family can go extinct. Joe Rogan's, my family could go extinct. He's got every protective measure he needs. Joe has got protection up the yin yang inside of his house. If this body graph is right, by the way, he's got protection up the yin yang. He knows how to handle a firearm. He's got a panic button. He's got a panic room. That's what the fear of extinction does. When you have the resources, it freaking builds a bunker, because we could go extinct. It's the splenic primordial awareness that, hey, we could get wiped out. There's no rule that says humanity can't be wiped out. Where's the rule? Here comes a comet. It's over. Bye-bye.
I bet you doomsday preppers have a lot of 44s in their charts.
44s all over. 44s and 19s all over the place. Yes. Yes.
Because I have 44.
Right. So, but this channel of preservation, it's his only sacral definition. So we know the responsiveness flows through this channel exclusively. It is where is his responsiveness? It moves into what Savannah has 3 times in her body graph, gate 50. I forget if you have a gate 50 in your body graph. I don't. It moves towards the
I
depth
don't
of the
think I have gate 50.
of
No,
the
I don't have gate 50.
of the tribal values. It's about creating the right tribal values that persevere and preserve the continuity of the tribe so that the tribe everyone can live and eat and have the right values and the right laws get established. So Joe Rogan's real interviewing style, as he is his responder self, could be all boiled down away from everything I said in the beginning to simply, oh, these are the right values during this interview. You are expressing the right values. I can talk more easily with you. Sorry, Sanjay Gupta, you're not expressing the correct values, the correct tribal values that we all know. Not letting you off the hook. In response, all the stuff on the other side, which is from 21, from his ego all the way up, everything there showed up as a response towards what I care about, gate 27, and the values they need to meet up with are not being met up by you, Sanjay. You're a lying little prick. And if you saw Sanjay, the generator, he was nervous. Did you see how many times he delayed? How many times he couldn't speak? Oh, come on. No, I don't know how many times he tried to just pull up a different topic or say something in agreement and appease the ego in the room.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no, well, yeah, did you hear about the horseworm thing? Yeah, he was agreeing with him, trying to get on his side, trying to be whatever, when all the while the controller didn't care. The controller was happy, but the controller was going to control stuff, but it was what he cared about. That was what the energy he truly generated. Joe generates a wave of energy towards what he cares about, where his nurture needs to go. So, and that's why he would have been so angry when someone says you don't know what to feel. That's true. Give the freaking guy a break. If you're emotional, by the way, sorry, I don't mean sound heated. So, Mrs. Rogan, in case you have an emotional solar plex definition, in those moments, give him a break, because when he finally goes through his confusion process, he'll know exactly what to preserve and care for. Don't ask him to feel in the feeling game, because he cannot compete with you there. You will always win, and he will always feel rotten about it if you put it in a win-lose situation. Frame it that way. You just let him off the hook, because he'll come back around with these deep set of values that will address everything that was so important to you the day earlier when you were in tears about something you needed him to feel deeply about. By the way, I don't know if any of this actually goes on, because I don't know her definition, but if she is a solar plex, there will be these moments. So he's this beautiful responder that just cares to deliver the American tribe the education it needs to preserve its values. I just keynoted his motors that speak. He will deliver to the American tribe the nurture and the caring that brings out the values, that keeps the continuity that the American tribe needs to be educated with. And he's going to damn well control his environment, and by which he is speaking it. So he can be influential, so he can be stimulating, so he can say, I know, and have a new
He has his own show.
like he does on the show. So to wrap it all up, Joe Rogan is he interviews basically as he is designed, and in his personal life, wherever there's things, because we all have them, he needs to be read. Joe, you need your chart read so you can see this beautiful diagnostic tool that lets us know who we are and who we are not. I love what he does online. I love the values that Joe Rogan brings to us. By the way, did you notice the world was willing to call him a hypocrite for a little while when he agreed to remove a few episodes from Spotify? I don't know if you saw any of that. Again,
No.
I was tuning in. Now, that was fake news that was pumping that. But they were quick to want to point out hypocrisy. And what does the sixth line suffer from? Being called out for hypocrisy. That's why Joe's values and his that's funny, yeah.
Well, I'm laughing because I can see my profile type play out throughout my whole entire life, and it's just something that that's going to automatically happen, regardless of what your profile type. The theme is going to follow you throughout your life.
Right. So you, the heretic, right? That theme followed you, the heretic.
Yes.
Me, the natural, that theme has followed me. The hermit has followed me throughout my whole life. and the oblivious one that needed to be educated with a strong foundation. But anyways, so when Joe lived out, yeah, you like that. I need to be educated. So, and that includes in relationships. If I'm with partnering up with someone I'm working with, they need to educate me on how they are. If I'm at work with somebody, if I'm with a new person, whatever it is in a relationship, I need to be educated over time. Joe Rogan needs to be educated over time, and which he gave himself. So no one can study like Joe. When he gets hot on something to study and look into, that right-facing arrow and that abstract definition will read and listen and study and ponder and go over and over and over again like a dog with a bone. Joe's a dog with a bone on each new topic.
Well, he's literally set up his podcast to do the studying as he goes, because he has a variety of very educated people that come on and talk about, different things different topics and all in a bunch of different areas.
Yep.
So he's not just educating himself, he's also helping educate the people, because some of the stuff that he does bring on, is like, I like to listen. The podcasts that I have listened to are the more spiritual based ones that he has done. And I have friends that would not be, didn't get into the spiritual side of things, but they are researching the information now because they watch or listen to Joe Rogan.
Watch or listen to Joe. Exactly right. In fact, listening to Joe, because of all this throat definition he has, he never need. That's why he did so well on Spotify. He carried a strong vocal quality. Look at how much definition goes to his throat. There's 3 channels going to his throat.
Yeah.
3. And only one of the gates attached to his throat isn't a channel. That's gate 56. So and look, it carries a whole myriad. So it's got tribal, the voice of the tribe goes to the throat. It's got the voice of the leader and the influential one. That's collective. So that's shared. The tribal is supportive. He needs to support. The collective shares. So he shares his influence, and he needs to share that influence with the world. And then the individual, his uniqueness, the mutative expression that suddenly popped out something new. Holy snap cakes. Joe just said that. That just came out. This is news. This episode's going to get taken down, because that can happen, because Joe has that unique insight. Every single bit of it is predicated to what does he care about. That's what this 2750, but if you could point that out in the body graph, 2750 from the sacral, yes, this channel of preservation, this cauldron of values, which is gate 50. It's gate 50 starts up the whole splenic process, just like gate 6 on the other side starts up the emotional wave. It's the source of it all. This would be a source channel, just like I always call the other one, the source wave. It's these deep cauldron of values is everything to do about making the law. The law has to be a certain way. It's in his nodes. He's driven in his nodes to basically come up with the law, and the other part of his nodes are driven to be what it cares for. His nodes define this definition. So his whole path through life was guaranteed to have a trajectory that followed into what he cared about. And because he's a 6'2" profile, that means the first 30 years he lived out the third line, which is the anarchist and the martyr and the trial and errorist and the person who would do whatever, the kamikaze. Joe was the kamikaze. He comes and strikes and then tries something else and sustains at that. And so that anarchist ultimately gave him his values, by which he then later, as the role model, expresses these values. And in a 9-centered form, those values are: we must commune. The American tribe must be preserved. Joe Rogan cares to nurture and preserve the American tribe in a way in which he can naturally feel called to be a capable administrator and basically be a role model to exemplify and demonstrate how that's all done, as he brings like forces together in a beneficial attraction in an arena he can control, in an abstract way he can explain, and get all that knowing out. That was a mouthful. You know what I just did there? I just keynoted.
Yes, you did.
That was so, it was a mouthful because it's got a lot of definition, and to be influential with all of that. So, and he does it all from behind a mask, the beautiful mask of the Joe Rogan Project, the MME fighter, and just Joe as a character onto himself. Right? His own face acts as a mask in a way.
Yes, it does.
And from behind that beautiful mask, and even the ear, I notice he always has earphones on. He doesn't have to. He could set up his studio to where no headphones were needed. You know, that's, you can do that. That's part of his mask. He's from behind his headphones. You know, from behind that, he can become influential and keep that deep cauldron of values being preserved in a way that the king can help be the king, help educate us all. Thank you, Joe.
Very good.
Yeah, thanks for being you, buddy. Thanks for doing all that stuff. And we should go, Jen, we should go see Joe Rogan sometime. He does stand up still, I think.
Yeah, we'll have to look into that.
Yeah, that was a lot. I felt I'm tired actually.
well, it was a long show, but very interesting in his chart, and I can definitely see him living his design. So
yeah, you know, this was, how long did we go?
We're at 1 hour and 23 minutes.
Good Lord. Well, Joe, if you watch this, I'm sending you a bill. Find my Venmo and send me my $250. So this was, Joe is perfect at what he does is the thing. And I really enjoyed doing this. It was, like I said, I'm fatigued.
A very, very interesting chart, and great job decoding Mr. Joe Rogan.
We've been holding him on standby for a while. I'm glad we finally did the deal.
Yeah, he is one that you have been wanting to do. So
like Russell.
We'll definitely have to repost this and tag him in the post, and whoever you emailed the last time or whatever, email this episode to him. And
yeah, I'm gonna have to go find out the text message. I think it'll take me hours to find it, but I'll find it. Sunday, bringing up all of this, it seems only fitting that we segue into Sunday's episode as being, we never did the throat center, Jen. When we did the 9 centers,
we did not do the throat center.
Savannah pointed out, she texted it to me. She said, Dan, I don't think you did the throat center. So, you know, so with all this throat action, it only makes sense that we move on. Do you feel like doing that?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, is Savannah going to be coming on? Do you know?
I don't know.
You froze.
Oh yeah, how about now? It's this thing that keeps coming up. That's why you see my eyes go away. There's a pop-up that keeps showing up.
Distractions. Shut them all down. Yeah, no, that would be a good one because there's a lot of influential gates on there.
Yeah, we'll go through the voices.
And it's a very active center.
All roads lead to that throat center. All the awareness leads to it. We're designed to manifest, articulate. Our speech is truly our biggest magic, as much as our opposable thumbs and the concepts that come out. It's amazing. So every gate has a voice. We're gonna go and talk about the voices of the throat center. What voices do you have?
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much, and thank you for everyone who tuned in tonight. As always, if you like this show, please make sure you subscribe, and share it out with somebody that you think would benefit from it. And tag Joe and see what he thinks about this. Maybe you can get on the show and talk about it, because it would be up his alley.
Right up his alley. You know, if I went on a show, I can see it now. I'd be like, look up Joe or Jay or whatever. He'd have me look up his friends. That would be funny.
Yeah. But it would be interesting to see if he would do it. So I would feel he would be somebody that would jump on it, because he likes talking about all sorts of different topics. So
he covers all the topics. He's really an amazing man. I'm so grateful on behalf of our American tribe. I'm grateful Joe is an important voice. I'm grateful. Just plain out. Thank you.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Well, guys, we will see you on Wednesday, and hope you have a wonderful and beautiful evening. Talk to you later.
Take it easy, everyone.
Bye.